thanks for everybody for attending. We got a full agenda, I would say. And I'm going all virtual because I left all my hard copies at the office. So it's all lined up on my screen right here. So first, I guess I'll take a motion for approval of the minutes from September 24th, which is, a little while ago now. So
I think I found a little glitch on the second page. The last line of the first paragraph. The effort was a large modification and did not closely following preservation guidelines. Don't think it should be following. I think it should just be follow. Correct?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for catching it.
Well, that's the only thing that I came up with. If no one else has anything, I'll move that they be approved.
okay, a second.
I'll second.
Okay, I saw Jim's hand go up, but who else seconded? Was it
Miss
If
Quarterneck?
I can.
okay? Okay, so all in favor? Aye.
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 Okay, the minutes are approved.
Thank you.
Public comment?
None was submitted beforehand, and we don't have anyone on the call, so we can proceed.
Okay, so we've got 5 items, new business items ready for action, and then we have 2 old business items ready for action. So first of all, we'll start off with a presentation by Joe Sonderman of the Route 66 Association of Missouri. So it's going to be a Route 66 night. So this is going to be a really good night. Do you want to introduce Joe? Joe?
Certainly. Mr. Sonderman is a local historian on Route 66 and quite renowned. He's also involved in the Route 66 Association here in Missouri. And he was kind enough to accept an invitation to attend tonight. As you know, Wildwood is blessed with the original location, or a portion of the original location, of the Mother Road, and that's Manchester Road for all intents and purposes. As you get further west in the community, you actually start to see some of the old road in its glorious form. And so we're really thrilled to have Mr. Sonderman here tonight to kind of talk about Route 66, its role here in Wildwood, and just his thoughts on it as what I would consider probably one of the premier experts in at least the St. Louis region, if not the Midwest. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Sonderman if there are not any questions of Kathy or I.
All righty. Can everybody hear me all right? Good. Okay. Kathy's going to move my slides for me as we go, since we're doing this virtually. But I just wanted to talk a little bit of background about Route 66, because I know you all know the history of your community pretty well, but you might have questions about Route 66 and why is it so special? A lot of people have come up to me and they'll say, well, it's just an old road, but we've got songs, we've got magazines, apps, social media. It's just an old road, they say, but it's not. Okay. It's not about the pavement. It's about the stories. It's about the people. When some people see an abandoned building, especially people like us, involved in the city, we think it's an eyesore. But one of the first things a Route 66 traveler realizes is that every ruin tells a story. When you look at that old abandoned place, you say, there's a person, a family that made their living off the Mother Road, and they had it all taken away one day by the interstate. It was just gone. Today we travel in our SUVs, and we got our sealed air-conditioned cocoons. We don't see anything at 75 miles per hour. There's that famous Charles Kuralt quote that you don't see America from the interstate. We've got the chain restaurants, especially now, chain restaurants, chain motels. The interstate off-ramps, they're the same from town to town. The McDonald's in Tucumcari, New Mexico tastes the same as a McDonald's in Chesterfield, Missouri. It doesn't, and that there's anything wrong with that. Not that there's anything wrong with McDonald's, but you want something different, or you want something less predictable, something that's not sanitized for your protection. Well, that's what Route 66 is for. See, we're not in a hurry. Okay. If you're in a hurry, stay on I-44. All right. But we're not in a hurry. We think time is holy. We like to slow down a little bit and enjoy the mom and pop cafes and the unpredictable and the unusual. Now, some of that, there are bad experiences too, but you never know. That's the beauty of it. When we were traveling, you might pull over at that roadside eatery. It might be the best hamburger you've ever had. It might be the worst. You know, the motel might be great, might be a flea bag, but you never knew. And that was the unpredictability was part of its appeal. So really, Route 66 is a combination of a lot of older roads like Manchester. Manchester's actually one of the newer portions of it. A lot of it follow old Indian trails and wagon routes. The railroads, of course, closely followed those routes, and they really dominated travel in Missouri after the Civil War. We didn't care about roads then. They were only maintained to help the farmer get his product to market and to get everybody to the or to the railroad station. So at this time, towards the beginning of the 20th century, promoters are laying out a bunch of roads. The promoters, private people, were doing it. They would give it an important sounding name, and they'd paint color-coded stripes on every available surface, telegraph poles, fence posts. They were all emblazoned with these stripes to help you follow the Lincoln Highway, the Dixie Highway, the Old Spanish Trail. They all had these romantic names. So the one that we're concerned with was laid out in 1917. It was called the Ozarks Trail Route, and it ran from St. Louis to Romeroville, New Mexico for some reason. And there it picked up the National Old Trails Road and went into Los Angeles. But the trouble with a lot of these roads or these trails is these associations were in it for the buck. They would make money when merchants and even whole towns would contribute to have the highway routed through there. So the poor motorist, depending on who paid their dues, might be taking miles and miles out of his way. And a lot of promoters, they didn't spend anything on maintenance. It was all about advertising and promotion. So eventually it was mayhem, and the federal government had to step in, which they did in 1925. The American Association of State Highway Officials is the group that does the numbering for our federal highways. And they put out a system for the east-west highways to be assigned even numbers, okay? The north-south routes would get odd numbers. And the really important ones, the east-west transcontinental routes, they would end at 0. Well, there was one fellow that didn't really cotton to that. His name was Cyrus Avery, and he was a bigwig in the Oklahoma State Highway Commission, and he was on the committee, and he made darn sure that the important sound in 60 came right by his business in Tulsa, right past the inn and service station his family owned. And so everybody agreed. Everybody said, okay, that's cool. And here's Missouri going to press with their map that says US 60, linking St. Louis and Joplin. But naturally, somebody had to object, and that person was the governor of Kentucky, William Jane Fields. He wanted 60 to go through his state, and he was mad. He was going to hold up the entire program. Angry telegrams flew for months, and eventually they decided, okay, we'll change Chicago to Los Angeles to 62, and we'll change 60 to 66. It got much more complicated than that, but we don't have all night. And it's a good thing they ironed that out, because get your kicks on Route 60 just doesn't work. It doesn't work. You know, nobody's going to buy Phillips 60 gas. Okay. It's not going to happen. So now that we've got the name straightened out, it's time to go to work and making the road famous. Part of the reason we all know Route 66 is because it had its own PR firm. Not a lot of people realize that. When the federal highway system was improved in 1926, the representatives from the states on the route founded this association to promote the highway. So at their first meeting, which was in Tulsa, naturally, Cyrus Avery came up with the name the Main Street of America. And that's what they were going to call it. Whether it was or not, they were going to call it that. But only 800 miles were paved. And once you got west of the Texas line, there were only 64 miles of pavement all the way to California. So they go to work. In 1928, they team up with a promoter who's kind of a shyster, kind of a man of all he was a modern day P.T. Barnum. His name was C.C. They called him Cash and Carry Pyle. And his idea was to stage a transcontinental foot race from New York to Los Angeles, with the western portion, of course, being over Route 66. Well, trouble is, he expected to be paid if he routed that race through the town. And so a lot of towns would sign up, and at the last minute, they'd bail on him. And so he was losing money pretty seriously the whole time. So it started out with about 275 runners. And I want you to think about this. They're running in all kinds of weather, all kinds of road conditions. They're running with traffic. The road is not shut down. It's one of the first integrated sporting events. So those poor African-American fellows, they always had some good old boy with a shotgun standing over them, making sure they got out of town before sundown. It was horrible in some of these places. This would make a great movie. So there were only 55 of them left. And the winner was from Foyle, Oklahoma, which is a Route 66 town. And his name was Andy Payne. He was a half Cherokee. He made it in 87 days. He won $25,000. Pyle lost a pile of money. And the Bunyon Derby did go through Wildwood. All this spectacle. We'll talk about that in a little bit. So again, we're talking about our role in pop culture. The image we probably most associate with Route 66 in the 30s are the poor Okies and their overloaded jalopies. That's an enduring image of the Great Depression. It was at that time when Steinbeck wrote The Grapes of Wrath, he called Route 66 the Mother Road, the road of flight. And some of us still call it that to this day. So you'll hear that phrase. But you know what? There was a positive side too. It provided an economic lifeline for a lot of people because they stayed behind and they had jobs. They were operating cafes, tourist courts, gas stations, and government relief programs put a lot of people to work widening this highway. So it had its upside. So it wasn't completely paved until 1938, if you can believe that. The last gap was in Oldham County, Texas. And during World War II is when it really entered the public's consciousness because it was the road for tons and tons of military equipment. It linked vital military bases, Fort Leonard Wood, the Douglas Aircraft Factory in Tulsa, Fort Wingate in Arizona, and all those defense jobs in California. But in Missouri, it was such an important road that they halted construction on all the other roads, all the other federal highways, to work on Route 66 around Fort Leonard Wood because they couldn't get all that stuff up that hill and that little 2-lane road. So once we're out of World War II, that's our golden age, what we call it. Roadside businesses were at their peak, and these guys were amazing. They came up with all sorts of stuff to stand out because the roadside was crowded, and you wanted to get mom and dad to stop. It was always the kids that yelled at mom and dad to stop. My old man would not stop unless the car was on fire, and there was a likelihood the only thing he would do would be to speed up to put it out. So we drove by all the reptile ranches and the trading posts with the fake monsters and the Indian ruins and all the great curios and rubber tomahawks and all that stuff. Even a place that, said that it was a Jesse James hideout, even though Jesse James never came within 150 miles of it, but that's okay. It makes for a good story. So at that time, it's about to become an even bigger icon. In 1946, Bobby Troop and his wife, Cynthia, are headed to California where he's going to make it as a songwriter. They're just outside St. Louis, believe it or not, when his wife, Cynthia, leans over to him and they were going to write a song about Highway 40. And she said, you know what? That's stupid. We're going to be on Route 66 here in a minute. And she reached over and said, get your kicks on Route 66. She came up with it. Nat King Cole recorded it in March. Since then, it's been recorded by dozens, and I mean dozens of artists. Depeche Mode has a cool version. I love that one, but I'm an 80s guy. The Stones, every country singer you can think of. It's one of the most covered songs in American music history. And in 1952, again, they launched a cross-country promotional caravan to promote the road again. This time as the Will Rogers Highway, in honor of Will Rogers. But that was even a promotion. It was a movie promotion for the story of Will Rogers. And we're all enjoying this, and we're all digging this prosperity out there on Route 66. And suddenly 1956 comes, and things are about to change big. The interstates, Eisenhower signs the Interstate Highway Act, and the first interstate work under that act actually began here west of St. Louis, just a few miles from Route 66. This photo is looking east on Interstate 70 from what would be Highway 94 today. Actually, that road is now West Clay, the one that you see kind of going off to the left. And that would change everything. That would change everything. These towns were bypassed. Whole towns disappeared when the interstate went through. A great example is the town of Glen Rio, New Mexico, and Texas. It's on both sides of the lines. It had truck stops and motels and gas stations. But the day that interstate came, it all went away. Today, it's a ghost town. The only thing you will find are ruins and the occasional, barking dog. So even while this is going on, the interstate's replacing it. But a CBS television series is going to give it even more allure to a lot of people. From 1960 to 64, Route 66 beamed into the living rooms. But the truth about Route 66 is it almost never filmed on Route 66, almost never. 2 episodes were filmed here in St. Louis. They played this show, told the story of these drifters, Buzz Murdoch, 1Z, and Todd Stiles, 1D, for some reason. Maharis, who was playing Buzz, left the show, and you'll remember he was replaced by Glenn Corbett as Link Case. And another great story is you notice the Corvette in here. How many of you thought that Corvette was red in that show? Never was. It was beige, because beige photographs better. But in my mind, I always envision these 2 guys in this Corvette slipping around Route 66. And it's part of the reason it's so popular. We see so many people from Europe. This show is in everyday syndication in Europe. For some reason, not here, but particularly in Germany, it runs all the time. So the interstates have come, and they've kind of killed things for us. And finally, the day comes in October 1984 when they open Interstate 40 around Williams, Arizona. That was the last community to be bypassed. And in 1985, they literally took it off the map. They decertified the road, but it didn't die. And the reason was a lot of people like myself, nostalgia buffs, maybe roadside rebels, maybe people who are just antisocial, I don't know, but we still sought it out. We went looking for the tourist traps, the motels, the gas stations, the waitress with the coffee cup welded to her hand who calls you sweetie and hun. Those people are still out there. So in 1987, Arizona forms the first association. Ours was formed in 1990, and I'm proud to say we are the largest of all the state associations. But we also have associations in the Czech Republic, Germany, Canada, the Netherlands, Italy, Australia, Brazil, and that is just to name a few, because this road has huge international appeal. They remember when the United States was the greatest nation on earth. We were feared by our enemies, respected by our friends. By God, we put extra chrome on a Chevy just because we had the resources, and we could because we're America, damn it. And that's the glory days that a lot of people are looking for when they go out on Route 66. So now we can go ahead and turn to WILDWOOD'S section. I didn't go into depth on it because I know you've got a lot of work to do, but a lot of people say the original is always the best. But there are so many alignments of Route 66 through St. Louis. It changed so many times. They were always trying to get somewhere faster, always widening, always rerouting, always using a new bridge. So Manchester gets overlooked. And that also may be because Manchester is just darned annoying to drive. But the original route gets well away from Manchester. You make that turn up there at West Glen Farms, you make that left, and you're on the old road. And you're going to pass through the historic communities that make up Wildwood, which we all know, Fox Creek, Hollow Pond, Grover. We all know all those. But the road gets way away from Manchester, and it's still a Route 66 experience. You still get some idea what it was like to drive this road. For one thing, the speeds are lower. The route that became Manchester was originally an Osage trail, and they were followed by the fur traders. It was first laid out as called the Market Street Road because it was an extension of Market in the city. So in 1835, the state gets in on it, and they authorize a roadway between St. Louis and Jefferson City, which makes Manchester the oldest state route in St. Louis County. It's the very first state route. In 1920, Missouri voters get together, and they've had it with the mud. All right, we're sick of the mud. We're sick of getting bogged down. We're sick of this stupid road. And they vote a bond issue to create a state highway system. So a year after they do that, they begin paving Manchester, and the first pavement was from the North and South Road, what we now know as Brentwood Boulevard, to Etherton Road. So that would be the first part that you would see in your area. That was in 1921. Then the following year, the state system goes into effect. Manchester gets to carry routes 12 and 14, that the routes would split west of Gray Summit. 14 would go on to Joplin. That would become US 66. And then 12 went to Jeff City. That would become US 50. And 50 and 66 were originally assigned to Manchester for two reasons. One, it was the only improved route directly west from St. Louis that doesn't cross a river. A lot of people don't realize that until they stop to think. There's no major bridges on Manchester Road over a major river. The other reason was there were no gates to open. Honest to goodness, that was put in there because there was no farmland where the farmer had a gate across the road, but it was supposed to be temporary. A lot of people say, well, that's original and everything, but that was temporary. The official plan called for 66 to go through Pacific and Gray Summit. Trouble was that wasn't built yet because they still had to put two bridges across the Merrimack River. So finally they get that done. They get the new Watson Road open. August 6, 1933, almost immediately the business along Manchester from Maplewood all the way to Gray Summit see their business drop by half, sometimes more. They're closing right and left. They get together a group called the 50 North Highway Association, and they try to have Route 66 reassigned to Manchester, and they call for Watson Road to be an optional Route 66. Well, that didn't work. The bureaucrats didn't like it. So they went back to Washington and tried one more time. This time they wanted to have Manchester as optional 66 or US 66 North. That didn't work either. AASHTO, AAS, HTO, they do the numbers. They're not known for their sense of humor. They said, no, the plan all along was to send it through Pacific and Gray Summit. So I mentioned briefly the transcontinental race that went through Wildwood. And when you're coming down that road after you've made that turn from West Glen Farms, you are going to pass the site where the Bunyon Derby runners spent the night. They spent the night where the church is now, the community church. And that at the time was a place called the Hillside View. You get that nice, pretty hill there. And St. Louis refused to pay Pyle his fee, like a lot of cities did. They thought he was a crook, and he was a little bit of one. So they camped in what is now Wildwood to avoid, giving St. Louis any publicity. They decided they're going to run, keep it well south of the business district. It didn't matter. Thousands of people showed up, but they actually did spend the night right here in what is now Wildwood. So we're coming towards Atherton Road. Some of this is order. Some of this I'm dropping around just because I'm cutting it shorter. But you come to Atherton Road and you look on the right, there's that original Wildwood City Hall building. It was the City Hall from 1995 to 2009. That was originally the Elmer Funk store. And that was a huge meeting place for people in this area. The townspeople would gather there. There was a big picnic area, and they would call it Funk's Grove. They had parades, picnics, band concerts, big May Day festivities there. And across the road, this building you see here, where the Porch is, this interior design store, is, believe it or not, a blacksmith shop that dates back to 1865. That building has been there since 1865. So we go on a little bit further, and one of your best known landmarks, I think, is the WETZEL'S store, which is in Pond. This is a postcard I've got, and it shows Pond in 1932. And if you look there on the left, that building with the Texaco sign hanging from it is WETZEL'S store. Now it's been added on to since, but you could still recognize it today. It's right there a little bit west of Atherton. It's got a step parapet on it now, but once you look at it, you're like, oh my gosh, I do recognize that. After they sold that, it was the Growers store for many, many years. So that's an intriguing building. It's one of the most intact historical buildings you've got in Wildwood. Let's see what we've got next here. I got out of order. Oh yeah. Another treasured landmark you have in Wildwood is the old Pond School. And people don't realize that this was the third school building on that site as they kept burning down mainly. But the last one burned down in 1914, then they built this one. This design is special, but it's not special. It was a boilerplate design. It was a design the architect named J.H. Felt drew up, and hundreds of schools use this exact same design, particularly across Missouri. Eventually, the building reverted back to the family that owned it before, and they in turn donated it back to Wildwood in 2002. And bless Wildwood for restoring that. Now it's you can hold meetings there, all signs of thing, and it's a treasure. It really, really is. Let's go to the next one here. This is an old picture, but I haven't been out that way lately. This is the Pond Inn, and we all know Pond was originally known as Spears Pond. That's after Cyrus Spears. He's the fellow who ran the store and the tavern. And William Kesselring and his wife ran a store with a hall next door. They called it Kesselring's Hall and Grove, and it would be later known as the Wayside Inn, and then we know it as the Pond Inn, which, I'm not sure what the story is with that building at the current time, but I know they were restoring it last time I was down there, which was pre-COVID, so I couldn't really tell you for sure. On to the next. So across Christie from the Pond Inn, you had this attractive building that looks like such a typical farmhouse. It was the Pond Inn, the Pond Hotel. Now it may have opened as early as the 1840s, and old Cyrus opened it. It was later leased by the Essen family. We know them, and then they purchased it, and they rebuilt after a fire. They rebuilt on the same destination, and this was a huge, or built on the same foundation rather. This was a huge destination. Bicyclists would like to ride out here from the city in the 1920s, and it's evidenced by, there's a little tribute to a bicycle club. There's a little monument there on the north side of the road where this used to stand that talks about the bicycle club. So it became an antique shop. Then it became a residence again. Unfortunately, it fell into disrepair. They were trying to turn it into something else when the back roof gave way, and they tore it down in 2013. So yeah, we no longer have the Pond Hotel. One place we still do have is Old KERN'S Station, which this building, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with it, but you may not know the history. This was a blacksmith shop. That's how old this building was. It was ran by a fellow named John Kern. He opened his blacksmith shop in 1893, and he decided in 1925 that the blacksmithing business wasn't doing so well, kind of like how I feel being in the radio business. And as that business died out, he built this station. About the time that Manchester lost its Route 66 designation is when he went out of business. He didn't have enough business once 66 moved away. So we'll go to the big one we're all familiar with, and maybe our favorite. And I'm telling you, this place is earning international recognition. I mean, you can take that to the bank. The Big Chief was opened in 1928, and it was a model for a proposed chain of modern highway facilities by the Pierce Pennant Company. Pierce Pennant was the first to use radio advertising, the first to hand out free maps. They were the first to put directional signs and billboards, first to sponsor baseball games, so many things. This place was huge. It had a restaurant, 24-hour gas station, 62 motel units with garages that rented for $1.50 a night. Now, those motel units were bulldozed years ago. They were out back. They're gone years and years ago. It became Cafe 66 once everything closed down in 1946. They rented it out as apartments. They took the tower down there. The tower there that you see on there has not stood since, I think it was in 1959 when they finally took that down. And then the motel units they took down in the 70s when a roofing company owned it, and it kind of went downhill. So the restaurant is all we've got left. It was renovated. It became the Big Chief Dakota Grill, which Todd DeVille, I think, was the owner in 1996, but it closed in 2004. Now we've got Stephanie Mulholland, the wonderful Stephanie Mulholland. I forget her partner's name off the top of my head, but they have done some amazing things here. The food is fantastic. There really wasn't a huge landmark on our section of 66 until the Big Chief got its notoriety, and now people are seeking it out. And I think you're going to see a lot more traffic because of what they're doing there. So once you get past that, if you're driving on the west end of Wildwood, there are a couple of places where there's some old road to check out. There's Bunion's Lane. If you know where that is, turn right. You can follow the old road to Woodland Meadows. That service road there on the north side is actually old 66. There's another section at Fox Creek Road which is on the north side of 100. And that's pretty long. That gets a nice little 2-lane. It goes to 100 again at Route 00. And that kind of continues into Dutch Hollow, what they call Deutsche Hollow, because the settlers were German. And this was once a stagecoach stop, if you can believe it, dating way back, 1848, something like that is when the stagecoach stop was there. But George and Molly Stovall opened a tavern here in 1930, and it became a country music mecca. Their sons, Delbert and Delmer, formed the Missouri Valley Boys, which was a very popular country band. They performed all over the place. Stovall's Grove is cool because, like they say, it's not Hoosier. They say that it's actually in their slogan. It's not Hoosier, but it's still country, and it's a place where you can go and feel comfortable if you're from the city. And they have great food. Boy, their beans are remarkable. Nothing goes like beans and country music. I'm not sure what that is about. So finally, we're getting close to the end. I know you've got a lot of work to do, and I want to let you get on with your lives. I'll talk briefly about the Fox Creek Garage, which is on that stretch that we mentioned. This was a repair shop. It opened in 1917, and Edward Schott, who ran the place later, was a self-taught mechanic and machinist. He never went to school. He bought it in 1920, called it the Fox Creek Garage. His son, Ed, then went on and sold Model Ts. Then he sold Oakland automobiles. And then it became a Pontiac dealer in 1926. And then it became Schott's Garage, and then Schott's Pontiac, and then it was a repair shop. I don't think there's been anything in there since the middle 80s. I need to drive out there and look again and, kind of take a look and see what it is. But it looked to me like it was being used for storage. So
they're supposed to tear it down soon, right? We approve that.
Oh, I don't want to hear that.
Get out of here.
Yeah, well, and it's not in good shape. I mean, there you go. Well, I've got the update. Then I better get out there and take some pictures while it's still there. I find myself doing that more and more lately. So what we did here is we devoted all this time where this presentation drug out was just for a few miles of road through one municipality. So I want you to think how many stories there would be out there if there's 2,000 miles of this road, and how many agonizing presentations could be made from them. But we're expecting an influx of tourists in 2026, and we're already preparing for it because that'll be the road's 100th anniversary. 90% of it is still drivable, and we're expecting overseas travel to be huge in 2026. Matter of fact, we're hoping that maybe this summer it will rebound in a big way because overseas travel being halted by COVID, those people are chomping at the bit to get on the road. Just as soon, God willing, things get back to normal, there's going to be this huge pent-up demand among travelers coming from Europe. They come here. We take it for granted. To us, it's an old road. But they come here to experience the magic of Route 66. And let me tell you, it's all still there. It's just take time to get the heck off Manchester for a few minutes and you'll find it. And that's all I have for you this afternoon. If anybody has questions or they haven't dozed off.
No, that was fantastic, Joe. We appreciate that. And no, you did not bore us. That was every second of what you talked about was exciting as heck.
Well, good. I'm glad. Concerned. I usually see people's eyes rolling back in their heads, so I kind of know when to wrap it up. But listen, there's a couple of places if you want to learn more. I have a website called 66postcards.com. It has about 11,000 vintage photos of Route 66 on it. I've been collecting them for even before this revival started. And then I have a Facebook page called Missouri's Historic Highways and another one called Vintage St. Louis that has just oodles and oodles of nostalgia. And those are a couple of places to check it out. And that'll tell you all about the books. I've written 9 of them on Route 66, and books make wonderful Christmas gifts. Has anybody mentioned that? So, so you can go to Amazon or whatever and check it out. And I appreciate you taking time to listen to me. And because I'll talk about Route 66 all night. The hard part will be getting me to shut up.
Does anybody have any questions for Joe?
Yeah, I've got one. On the St. Louis County website, their interactive maps, they have very interesting historical aerial which overlay with the current, so you
Mhm.
can identify what has changed.
Mm-hmm.
Fortunately, the earliest one is 1937. And
Oh yeah, yeah, I've seen that. Yeah, it's cool. I mean, you can do the slides. There are earlier aerial photos available. It's just kind of hard to find. And and I didn't have time to put it together, but I wanted to talk about how Highway 14 originally ran south of where it does now. Once you got out of Pond, it ran behind where the Wildwood Historical Society is. There's the remnants of an old bridge back there. And
right,
it cut through and it wound up Tucker Hill. Now the road that they built in 1933 or in 26, I'm sorry, did not. So that road back behind the Historical Society was never Route 66, but we count it just because it's cool. And you can see those bridge abutments if you just go back there behind the barn.
okay, because that's what I was wondering about, because in 37, it shows the road on the west side of the Historical Society, and I was
Mhm.
wondering when that changed.
Yeah, that was a road that went up what they called Tucker Hill, which was at the time they bypassed that, it was the biggest construction project the Missouri Highway Department had ever done. It had this huge cut, and unfortunately, the soil was loose, so it wouldn't stay cut. So they had to end up terracing it and letting it set. And it took 2 years from the cut through, let the concrete set, and then they could finally bypass Tucker Hill. That's a whole chapter and story for when I've got a lot of time. But yeah, it's something to Google. Google Tucker Hill, and you'll get the whole saga.
Do that. The other thing you talked about, Schatz Garage. They came before us, the owners of that, wanting to tear that down and build a new garage there.
Mm.
And we went through it and pretty much found that garage has managed to deteriorate itself and do its demolition by neglect.
And we hear that a lot.
It was
We
in
hear that
really
a lot.
bad shape.
You know,
We approved, let's see, what did we do? Anyway, we wanted them to save the bungalow that was next to it,
mhm.
and that was our recommendation. I now notice that property is for sale. There's a big for sale sign there now.
Well, and and this is something we run up against as an ardent preservationist is money talks. And property owners, they want to make a living, they want to make a buck, they want to get the most out of their property. Sometimes we annoy the daylights out of them coming by with our maps and our history and all that stuff. And there's a couple of places in Missouri that were just demolished through neglect. And it's private property. It's a free country. You can't tell people what to do with their property, I guess, even though you'd like to. And that's sad. I'm going to get out there. I'll probably get out there tomorrow and photograph that old garage.
I guess you mentioned that there were older aerials. Well, I mean, you can't go back too far, and the planes weren't flying taking pictures. But
No.
wondering about the original alignment, because like they're just west of where Manchester splits off the road. There is this old original section
Mm-hmm.
up the hill. I don't quite see how that worked then. I was just wondering, are there old maps that
Yeah, there are modern maps that show it. We have, if you go to the our website, we have links, and there, or just Google it, Route 66 maps. I've got it. It's all mapped out. It weaved, Manchester went straight, but the old road was crooked and went up and down grades and sort of respected the land a little bit more. It's easy to find maps of those. I laid mine over Google Maps. I've actually got them. If somebody wants to send me an email, I can send them to you, show you where that was. But
that original route that Steve just mentioned, that pavement is still in pretty good shape over there.
It's pristine. What does that show you? What does that tell you?
Yeah, they don't. That means that they don't build it like they used to. That's what it tells you.
Well, and the real factor in that though is no heavy trucks.
Right.
That's trucks. I worked for MoDOT for much of my career, and God bless them, but they do a lot of damage. That pavement is pristine. I mean, that pavement was laid in 1925, that little stretch you're talking about, and it looks as good as new. You could look like you could drive on it now. I'm going to go do that tomorrow.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I rode my bike on it not too long ago, which
Oh, it's
was
nice.
it's
And that
it
was the
pretty easy to ride.
that's the kind of pavement that when you were driving on it made that thump 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 thump. You know, in all my childhood, I remember in the back of the vehicle listening to that. You know, and that's a reassuring sound.
Yeah.
What's the website again for the, was it 66postcards.com or Roots?
It's just 66postcards.com. And those are, I scanned the MoDOT archives when they were going to throw it away. So there's dozens and dozens of old MoDOT photos in there, but I also collect postcards. So there's about 10,000 postcard images in there. It's a hobby that went horribly awry.
So I think Freeman McCullough shared your passion, though.
Yeah. Oh, and he did so much important research. He's the guy on Tucker Hill, or he
Okay.
was.
Yeah, he was my old boss. He
Oh,
made me
yeah.
everything, a lot of what I am.
See, and I got there after he had left, and man, I only had a few conversations with him. Oh, he knows more than I'll ever forget. Just an amazing guy. Yeah,
he used to tell me, don't tell me why you can't do it. Tell me how you can get it done. And I've never.
And to hear that at MoDOT, oh, that'll get you in trouble.
Yep. Yeah. And he was always in trouble, and I was in trouble too.
Yeah, that place inspires mediocrity. But I'm not bitter.
All right. Well, anybody else have any? Well, we could talk to Joe all night, but I know I can talk to him all night. But we ought to probably get moving because we got a big agenda.
Yeah. All right, guys. I'll go have my dinner now. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Okay, Joe.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you. It was very interesting.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays to all of you.
Well, okay. Is anybody else as pumped up as I am now? That was awesome. So back to our business. We've got creation of a nominating committee for the 2021 election of officers. And Joe, is it really me? Do I need to appoint 3 of these folks to be the nominating committee?
To follow the letter of the bylaws, yes, but if there are volunteers, I would suggest starting there.
Well, I'll take volunteers, but I got 3 names written down on my paper. So if I don't get 3 volunteers, I got 3 names on here, and everybody's going to shake in their boots on who I'm going to call on. So volunteer. Anybody's hands up?
They're turning their cameras off now.
I know you're there, though. I can see the list. It's right over here. Can't hide from me. Okay. It looks like
My children told me years ago, quit volunteering, Mom.
Everybody take 2 steps back.
I know. Okay.
I guess what I was wondering, do the present officers wish, are they willing to continue in their roles? Or do they want to step down for the time being?
I think that's what our committee should coerce the existing members to re-up for the duties, but I think we need to go do the process. So are you volunteering, Steve, to be that nominating committee, to be on there? Otherwise, I've got my eyes on 3, so I'm just going to start blurting out names.
Go pick 3.
Okay, go pick 3. So Chris, you're one of them. I had because you got all those cool guitars in your back, so you caught my eye initially. Jim, I see you at church all the time, so you caught my eye too. And then Dan, I've got you on my list too. So
I will.
you're the appointed committee if you choose to accept it. Now, if you start yelling at me and saying I don't want to do it, I'm not going to force you.
Whatever you need, boss.
Okay, so I think we got our committee there, Steve, and it should be pretty easy because, you know, you're not going to have to twist my arm because this is a totally awesome awesome commission. So.
Well, Mr. Chair, what Kathy and I will do, we'll coordinate with the volunteers and see if we can find a time that works for them, and then we can start the process and then have hopefully a slate of candidates for the officer positions at our next meeting.
So Joe, so as far as the role of the nominating committee, basically they just have to find the slate of officers.
Yes.
Okay, so they could just say, Paul, we want you, Jan, and then somebody else to go up for election again, and then they're done, right?
Yes, unless there's nominations from the floor, which we typically accept, but normally if the nominating committee brings back a slate of officers, those are the ones that typically have been approved because, as I say, it's just a little bit more work, not a lot, but again, most everybody's glad to do it.
Which is a little different than in past years, because we go in a meeting and everybody look at each other like, who wants to volunteer or who wants to nominate somebody, and you nominate somebody and then you vote and you're done. So this is a little different than last year.
And again, remember when we updated our bylaws, we kind of incorporated a little bit more of a process and a lot of things, just so as if there were ever questions, we could always say we've followed the bylaws.
Okay, very good. So you guys can make it, it could be kind of easy for you guys. So, but it is the process. So do they let you know, Joe, or do they let me know, or who do they need to, is there a chair of their group?
Well, what we'll do is we need to coordinate with them because they do need to meet with Kathy or I or both of us. So we'll probably just do a Zoom call, and we're there just to make sure that there's notes or a record. They can talk about the candidates and ultimately put together a slate. And then once they have a slate of candidates, then we'll provide it to you as the chair, and we'll have it for discussion at the next meeting in January.
Okay, fantastic. Sounds
So
like a fun job, guys.
Thanks to the volunteers.
Thank you, guys.
I think that's called being voluntold, but
So I appreciate you guys for doing this. I really appreciate that. So so our next item on the agenda, if we can move on, right, Joe? We've beat that one.
Yes, sir. We're done. Thank you all.
Okay, the next item, which is number 3 under the ready for action items, is the review of submitted proposals for our favorite route, Route 66, Roadside Park, and that's in Ward 8.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair and members of the commission, as you know, earlier this year, we began discussions about a half-acre parcel of ground the city of Wildwood owns in the Grover area on historic Route 66. We had a lot of good discussion, and our chair of the commission also had some images he brought from other locations on Route 66 that have done similar roadside parks or recognitions on public property. As we discussed this over the course of several months, we reached a conclusion as a commission and staff to issue a request for qualifications for a firm to begin the planning and design of a roadside park that would recognize Wildwood's role in historic Route 66. A draft of the request for proposals was developed. It was submitted to the commission members. Comments were made. Those comments were addressed. And ultimately, the request for proposals was issued at the beginning of October, as I recall. And they had approximately 1 month to respond. We received 10 responses. And there's a variety of firms. Primarily all are local firms, and many of the names are familiar probably to some of you that have been around on the commission for a while, and for others, just because they're in the industry like Mr. Chair. So we've gotten a great response, which often means too, there's a lot more decisions to go into this. And I'm going to turn it over to the chair after I make one more statement. The hope of Ms. Arnett and I tonight is that we could reduce the list to a certain degree, and whatever that number may be, 3, 4, or whatever, then the department would do some initial preliminary interviews to reduce that number even further to maybe 2. And then we would have the interviews of the 2 finalists with the commission at one of our scheduled meetings. So that's the process we were thinking about. I think if we try to interview 10, or if we have a large group of people at an interview, it becomes a little cumbersome. So we're hoping that by your review of the proposals, your experience with maybe some of the companies or just hearing about them, that we could maybe, as I say, reduce it down and then let Kathy and I kind of take it to the next step and then bring back the finalist. And the number of finalists could be 2 or 3 if you prefer. There's really no hard and fast line. And so tonight we're here to kind of get your opinions on the companies, how you'd like to reduce that number down, and then go from there. So thank you.
Oh, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
When we went out to these guys and solicited input, are we working to a budget? Or are they going to bring the budget and we're going to try to work? How's that work?
Under state statute, we cannot make decisions based upon the proposal's cost. We first must look at qualifications. Once we select the finalists, then we can negotiate cost. And then if we don't like the cost of the proposal, the work product, then we can go to our second. And then if the same were to happen, our third. So we're under some guidance from the state of Missouri. So right now we're just looking at which firm caught your eye, which firm seemed to really kind of get something in there that made it exciting, those kinds of things.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so it's really just we're basing our selection on qualifications, or the city has to, and then you worry about costs later. But we want to pick the person we feel is going to do the best job for it. Teresa?
Yes, Mr. Vonich, what are the qualifications? What's the list of qualification criteria that we're basing this on?
Well, that's a very good question. As you can see from the proposals in the summary that Ms. Arnett and I prepared, almost all of them have some level of professional involved, whether it's a landscape architect, engineer, or in one case, a local historian, Mr. Sonderman. So first and foremost, we always look for the professions, the registrations, so to speak, of the companies and their participants. Because again, we are working toward an engineered plan that can be bid upon and then ultimately constructed. So that's the first kind of, I guess, filter the department looks at. It's just who are these people? What are their qualifications? What do they bring to the table? Secondly, we always prefer local firms. It's not that we're necessarily prejudiced against others, but in COVID-19 and in years past during the recession, we'd like to keep the money home. Now, we broke that pattern with the company called Human Nature out of Cincinnati, Ohio. But what we found in that case was just a really strong ability with the virtual environment, public input through the internet, et cetera. And that's just has worked so well for us during COVID-19. And for forever long, I don't know. So local firms. Thereafter, the department typically just goes in and starts looking at what they say in terms of a philosophy of their company, what they like to do. In the summary, I mentioned like SWT Design. They kind of live what they say. If you go by their offices on Big Bend Boulevard, they are a LEED certified building. They live and die by best management practices and in terms of environmental awareness, things along those lines. So if that's a critical component to anybody on the commission, that's probably one you would spend a little more time looking at. In the case of like Dennis Taki and John Gunther, both of them were incorporators. They've been in the area for decades. They're both well-respected architects. And from a kind of a local standpoint, understanding Wildwood, they are probably a strong selection. There was one firm, DG2, that was the only one that mentioned by including another consultant, the public input process. And as you know, we did talk about that when we were kind of scoping out how we would proceed with this particular item. So those are the things, those three filters are what I usually start with. I have the advantage of knowing a lot of the names, so that actually muddies the water some for me because many of them are just good professionals.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Elizabeth.
Go ahead.
Thank
And
you.
then
Who goes?
Elizabeth, go ahead. You go first and then Steve.
Okay. Could we just step back for a moment? And I remember making some comments about this, but I don't remember seeing, maybe I missed it, all of the different comments and questions about what we actually wanted on this memorial half acre. Did we do that?
we did talk.
I don't know who to ask.
In the request for proposals, we gave a brief summary. There was a list, I believe, I don't remember how many were on that numbered list of the things that you all identified. The historical aspect, roadside park versus a municipal parking lot or a pocket park, just those kinds of things that came out of our discussions. So we did our best to kind of capture those thoughts and then obviously follow a successful format just in terms of the request for qualifications form.
I recall one of the things that I mentioned is there was a suggestion of putting a memorial up for fallen soldiers. And I remember saying that I didn't think it was the place to put that along with Route 66, that a better place, I believe my comment was a place at City Hall. There could be other places as well. But I think if we're going to focus on this, it needs to be all about Route 66 and the historical part of what we're trying to endeavor, instead of adding something that might include a memorial to fallen soldiers.
Did you? I didn't really see anything like that in there personally, but
I didn't.
I don't know. Maybe I made that up, but I don't think so.
But I think it's still addressed by Elizabeth because it's not in there. I don't think it's in any of the proposals.
Okay, good. Okay, good. Thanks.
Okay. Kathy and Joe, I think your biggest mistake was not limiting these qualifications to 5 pages apiece. This was
It's a lot of material.
a huge thing. And I was impressed with the number of people, the firms that were interested in this. And I just hope they all realize how small this park is and how little it is, because they seem to really be taking this very seriously. So, and has it ever been discussed, the budget, construction budget? Were they ever told what money would be available to spend on the construction? I know it's not, you don't bid the design services, but you give them some idea of what budget, of how much money they're going to have to work with.
Go ahead,
None
Joe.
of-
I think that's for you, that you know what the budget looks like.
Yes, and Kathy, Ms. Arnett and I never gave a budget total for construction purposes. And for the most part, we kind of hid the amount for the actual planning and design as just a typical line item in the Department of Planning's operating budget for 2021. In my opinion, we have about $40,000 to $45,000 for the design services, which, as you know, isn't an extreme amount. But if the soft costs are, so to speak, 10%, then we're probably looking at a project somewhere in the range of $400,000.
It just seems like their statements and their interest and where they describe it, they seem to be talking about a bigger project than we have here, which is very impressive if they're willing to do all that.
Well, Mr. Scott, that may be another filter that you all would like to consider, is maybe they don't understand the project, and that could be used either as something to kind of either say they maybe not are in our top 5 or top 3.
Yeah.
So so Joe, how do
As
you
to the
whittle these down, actually? So
of the people, I'm sorry. As to the selection of the people here, they all look very good. I mean, I'm familiar with several of them. My recommendation would be to go with a firm that's led by a landscape architect. That would, unfortunately, I mean, Dennis and John are great, but they're architects. And I do think the lead firm should be a landscape design firm, since that's really what we're looking for here. That would be my only input. Otherwise than that, they all look extremely qualified, and we also got a pretty good presentation for great engineering with Joe's presentation tonight. So I'd like to work with him.
So, how many, just show, just wave your hand if you've actually kind of whittled things down. Cause I know, being the engineer I am, I read all the proposals, and I've actually got my folks that I've screened out, and I've got, 4 of them that I said should move on into like a final list. How many other people have done that? Jan has done that. Okay. So that's my question, Joe, is how do we whittle this down to, I know we mentioned, Great Rivers Engineering is one of the lead firms. They're definitely on the top of my list, just because of the focus on Route 66, and that they actually worked on that roadside park down in Springfield that I showed everybody pictures of. They know what it's about. They live it. They breathe it. And it's a landscape architect lead on that team. So they're definitely one of the shortlisted firms in my mind.
Well, Mr. Scott's point was very well Some of these proposals are lengthy in terms of just the number of pages and the information provided. And we know that you got them just a couple days at most before tonight's meeting. So I guess first and foremost, before I say how would the process go? If you like to take more time, we can wait till January to make the final, let's say, grouping, whatever that is, 3, 4, 5, whatever the number may be. I mean, the timeframe's on us because we have all of 2021 to complete this because we have not budgeted money in 2021 for construction. That given COVID-19 and the budget projections that we had for this upcoming fiscal year, we just didn't have the funding to do it. It's programmed and will be programmed for 2022. So we have some time, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I skimmed over them. I did not go into them in detail, looked at some more. I mean, I know like DG2, I'm familiar with Christy DeGuire, and SWT, I'm very impressed with. Paul, I'd like to know, what are the firms who are you picking here? Not that I'm going to agree with you or.
That's putting me on the spot, but the four that I've got at that, that I had at the top of my list was Gateway Design Studio, Great Rivers Engineering, Lamar Johnson Collaborative, and Planning Design Studio. Those were my top 4. And SWT was right. They were like number 5. But I definitely ruled out Human Nature just because they're from Cincinnati. And I ruled out Pattern and Ives. And I ruled out DG2 actually, right off the top. And I ruled out Dennis and John. I like those guys, but I ruled them out right away. And then TerraSpec I ruled out right away.
I can't disagree with that, but I'd like a little more time to look at these.
Does everybody want to take another? And would you get back to these the submitted firms and just say, hey, we're going to take another month to look this over, and then we're going to shortlist, and that makes a shortlist in January, and then interviews
February.
So that kind of extends this out a little bit, but we're in no time crunch. It's more.
Well, the good news is the property is owned by the city. It's not going anywhere. We have a wonderful new streetscape along its frontage, and so we can take our time and make the right decision.
Okay.
They just have to live with the curb cuts we put in.
Yes, sir.
So everybody's good with talking about this again in January, but everybody's got to do their homework.
I feel like right now we'd be like throwing a dart at a dartboard.
Yeah, I mean to look at what they say about themselves is wonderful, that's what they're supposed to do. So it's hard, and they all look good. I was impressed with the list that we got.
Yeah, I was happy to get 10 respondents, and actually, I heard of another person I talked to today, and they said, "Oh, we just got too crunched for time. Otherwise, we would have had number 11." So that helped us.
I think it's going to be a fun project. It's one of those that it's not your typical park. It's not a typical trail. It's in a historic community along the Mother Road. It could be a real signature for a firm.
Mm-hmm. The only trick is to keep within the budget. That's going to be the tricky thing, because there's a lot of great ideas out there, but staying within the budget that we have to spend is going to be the challenge, I'd say.
Well, you'll be the first cut that comes along, so we're glad you're with us.
Okay. All right, so we'll talk about this in January. So now the next item on our agenda is the draft of the 2021 work program.
Ms. Arnett is presenting.
Yes, I am. Thank you. And I will run copies. That report was so long on the Route 66. So for those of you who didn't pick up a copy, I'll drop those in the mail. So you have the paper ones to kind of flip through and compare. It might be a little easier than a couple hundred pages on the PDF online. So.
And one last thing before she starts on this agenda item, we will send an email out to the 10 firms telling them that given the response, we're going to need a little bit more time and we appreciate your patience.
And Joe, in regard to Mr. Scott's comment, and that was where I was headed with my budget question, along with that note that you send those 10, do you want to frame the scope of this? Do you think based on what we think the scope will be and the minimum scope that it is, that maybe the 10 won't be 10?
I would probably not want to do that because I'd hate to have one that everybody agrees upon, not knowing what you might agree upon at this stage, remove themselves when there's always negotiation.
Okay.
So
I think from the what I was going to say, their statements, they identified, a lot of them had a plan of that area. They know how little it is and what it consists of. So, you know, you can just put so much stuff into an acre and a half, especially if a bunch of it's parking. So I think they should know the scope of it.
And a number of them did ask, you know, they asked questions about if there were going to be multiple buildings or buildings at all. And, you know, we were vague so that we don't necessarily direct them into a specific design, but we did give them enough information that they were understanding that it's not big buildings. It's maybe it's typical pavilion or something more suitable for a small half-acre park with parking. So we were giving them, I think they're just, this is the dog and pony part of the show. And I think that they're trying to really just put their best foot forward to get through to the next phase. So, okay, with that, we'll move on to the,
Teresa.
is there any more questions? Yeah.
Teresa.
Yeah, I think that after that presentation, it sounds like we need to have a focus also on the 2026 time frame that he said people will be coming through. So to keep that in mind of what that's going to mean to us and what we're going to need for that. So, you know, maybe in our design, in our what we propose to these different companies, that's one of the things we're looking at, just to meet those needs.
And Mr. Chair, with your permission, one last thought on this. I recognize that the property is only a half acre in size, and relative to community park or Greensfelder County Park, it's very small. But I'd be disappointed if the firm we chose didn't look at the road itself, the new streetscape, and figure out ways to promote Route 66, not only at the roadside park, but as part of the road itself. So I think it could be a much more of a project if they put their thinking caps on and bring their imagination.
And there's plenty of great minds in that group, so.
Okay, with that, we'll roll into the 2021 work program. As you'll note in the memo, there's no new items that have been added for 2021. We we've added 3 throughout 2020. So as you know, we're flexible. So if something does come up in 2021 that you all want to add, we can certainly do that. I will note there is one error in the memo. There's 13 items, but I left one out because I kind of thought before we shuffled the agenda, we were going to complete number 1 tonight, but that's not going to happen. So the proposal for the 2021 work program is actually 14 items because the Champions of History program was left off and that needs to be on there, but we will complete that first quarter of 2021. So the proposal is the carryover of the 14 items that are unfinished from the 2020 work program, some of which are newer than others. And then also to keep our 5 ongoing items as well within 2021. So we would be happy to answer any questions. If you all have anything that you would like to add, you will note that the Route 66 Park and General Route 66 promotion is on there. And I think this 2026 gives us some great goals for ongoing Route 66 promotion over the next couple of years. So, I know, Paul, you've been chomping at the bit. We got to get some of these off our list and then we can get on to Route 66. So. All right, so I'd be happy to answer any questions or if y'all have any additional suggestions or items you'd like to add.
So do you know something that we don't about the Cone Park sign? Because that's on here and it's carrying over and you've got that in the second quarter, I guess, of 2021.
So you all are waiting on staff at this point for Cone Park. For us, we need to do a little more research. We've moved away from, I believe, the contract was never signed by Mr. Rosner to move forward with the rail design. We can go back to him again and ask. It's been a little while. I think he's probably in his personal life maybe settled down a little bit and maybe wants to take on this task. So we can swing back and check. But we owe you all some research on, we had discussed more of a rail, we need to research on Katy Trail and some other signage things. So our hope is we can get that one knocked out in the first few months of 2021.
Mr. Chair, most of the responsibility lies with me, but I think I have a pretty good reason why we've kind of not pressed this particular one. We need to do some repairs along the frontage of Cone Park at North Etherton Road. We have a drainage problem there that would, for all intents and purposes, precludes people getting off the road onto even the grassy area associated with the park. And so we've got money set aside in 2021 to address that right-of-way area. So at least if somebody wanted to pull off, they wouldn't be putting themselves at risk.
So should that wait for that issue to be addressed before we mess with the sign? Just because otherwise we don't know where the sign would kind of go.
Yes, and maybe the suggestion would be that we add the Cone Park work as a work program item as part of the overall signage discussion. So basically have 2 components to the one place.
It would definitely be strategic about where to place the sign and where the pull off would go. I think it does make sense to put it together. That's okay with you.
It's really not up to me. I work for you all as the Historic Preservation Commission, so you tell me. And Kathy and I will do whatever you want.
I think that makes sense, Paul.
I drive past that every day now, so I'm seeing the issue that you're talking about, and
it's not accessible.
No, it's pretty muddy in that corner right there. So
It would likely make sense if we're mobilizing to do the repair work anyway, that we would be ready with the sign and just complete all of it at once.
So if there's no objection amongst the commission members, we'll add the repairs to the right-of-way area for access purposes as part of the work program and just do it under the sign. So it'll be like items A and B, so to speak.
Is it our intent to leave the ground in its natural state, or is there any plans to clean it up or, cut?
Well, we maintain the park. We cut the grass, we pick up the tree limbs, we trim the trees. The true problem is just making that access off the edge of the roadway safe, and then having a stopping point, a place to stage if you wanted to get out and look. I'm leaning toward fixing the drainage problem and maybe doing something like we talked about in the historic Orville community, just doing a simple pull off, where if you just drive by and wanted to take a picture, you could get off easy and get back on easy without having to kind of work through a steep drop off from the edge of pavement into an area that's just full of mud.
Does the county own Etherton Road right there? They do, don't
Yes. And we've had many, many conversations. And what inevitably happens is on the opposite side of North Etherton Road, across from Cone Park, they'll basically trench and ditch out that drainage swale there, so the water can pass through that and then cross the road and come onto the park. So we haven't had the level of success I would like working with the Department of Transportation and figuring out a solution to the drainage problem down there.
Okay, well, this will be an A and B item on our 2021 work program.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Kathy.
I mean, on the historical survey, item 2, have they started doing that? Are they going to be able to complete that with the COVID and everything?
Yes, they've started the research. We're finalizing the letter to the property owners, which will get sent out. And then beginning probably near the end of next week, they'll start the physical reviews of each of those properties. So the goal is still by the end of the year for them to complete their work. It may go a little bit into January, but you should have it. It should be on the January agenda.
Very good. Very good.
And I don't know if I need to say this, but I will. When you look at the work program, and as Kathy described it, there's a number of carryovers from 2020. I think more so than anything, COVID-19 is the cause of that. Obviously, the history book would be completed, the points of interest map, if we had our Celebrate Wildwood event in 2020, but we didn't. So it's kind of slowed things down, but certainly I think we had a prosperous year regardless.
And truly, you've taken on some very big items. The 15 items that we have aren't just small, check them off the list kind of items. We're building Champions of History programs. We're writing a master plan. We're, doing building restoration. We're wrapping up a book that has been more than a 5-year process. We're wrapping up a historical marker program that has been, I don't even know how many years, 8 years. So we're, they're not small things that you all are tackling. So that's the other factor. Any other questions?
No.
I'm sure you got the next item too, right, Kathy?
I do. Our certified local government, our annual report.
Mr. Chair, if there are no changes other than the one discussed regarding Cone Park, the department will respectfully request a motion and second to approve the 2021 work program.
And the addition that Kathy of the Champions of.
Yep. Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
Got 2 changes. Okay, I'll take a motion for approving the 2021 agenda.
I'll move that to be accepted with Kathy's addition and the Cone Park revision.
We have a second.
I'll second.
Jan, saw your hand up.
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it.
Thank you.
We've got a program for next year.
Get that revised and provide the full list to you in January as well. So. And the next item is our annual report as part of our requirements being a certified local government under the National Park Service. We owe the State Historic Preservation Office an annual report each year. The program runs on the federal government fiscal year. So that's October 1st to September 30th, which is why we do it now. I apologize for asking for your resumes at the very, very last second. I lost track of what month it was, frankly, and was scrambling at the end on that. I usually like to give you all more time. So if you want a whole lot of time, if you want to review your resume now for next year, I'll take any changes at any point over the next 11 months for our next annual report. So basically the annual report, it covers the commission, it covers all of your background, it covers our meetings, it covers your trainings. So we had the training tonight will actually be part of next year's annual report. But we had training from Mr. Allen on historic preservation landscape. We had Ms. Fox's on one-room schoolhouses and Mr. Harles on archaeology. So we've covered a lot in training. Ms. Stevens attended one and Ms. Broyles. So even through COVID, we still had a lot of training, more than some years when we didn't have COVID to present back to SHPO. So I thought that was fabulous. And then we covered the work that you all do. We had a very low number of demolitions. We only had 2 in the past fiscal year, which was good. A couple years back, we had quite a few. And so it was nice to report a lower number this year on our demolitions. And then we just reported all the other work that you all do. So the inventory, the history book, those are big things for the program. And those are the types of things that they look for. So y'all are doing a great job, and they complement. One of our other requirements is every month I send them our minutes and agendas after each meeting. And several times a year, we get compliments from SHPO on the work you all are doing and just how thorough you all are. So kudos to you. Y'all are doing a great job. So I'd be happy to answer any questions on the annual report.
And Mr. Chair, if I could add one thing, I guess it's my night to continue the meeting. Thanks to Ms. Stevens, we did participate in the Missouri Bicentennial celebration. As you know, the history book was accepted. Our legacies, the 3 that we sent, I believe were accepted, right, Kath?
Not yet. We don't have a final answer yet.
Okay. So that was a big program for us because, as you know, we spent time discussing the community legacies. We sent out letters to those individuals that have community legacies but are privately owned. So, like I say, it was a good year, I think, for us all told.
And there's no action needed on that one. So thank you.
I got one question about the nomination again. I was just looking at the CLG report, and we've got a few people expiring. You know, their terms expire in, well, mine expires in May of 2021. Dan's expires in February of 2021. Jim expires in May, and so does Debbie. Does that have any impact on nominations? Because we would have to be reappointed by the mayor, right?
Yes, the mayor appoints and the city council confirms. And depending on how long you've been on the commission, the mayor has followed the charter requirement that if you have 8 years or more, They generally or will not be reappointed. So I guess I would say for the purposes of the nominating committee, we can always address it at that time. I would want to just go ahead and get the slate of candidates the 3 volunteers feel are best to offer for the consideration of all the members. And
Okay.
then kind of go from there.
Okay. I was just looking at the terms in the CLG report, and that just struck me. So none of us are, I'm the old timer on the, believe it or not, I'm the old timer on this commission. So that's.
It's a very good point. I don't want to minimize the point. It's just trying to guess what might happen. It's just hard to do.
I'll try not to tick off the mayor in the next couple. Yeah, Teresa.
No, I just pulled this back up too, the expiration. So not everyone is appointed for the same time, the length of time. Is that right?
Sorry, go ahead. The terms are the same. It just depends if they've been appointed for multiple terms, and some people have been appointed to fill vacancies. So I would have to look back at the whole roster to see if someone is on a second term, if they're just filling we're appointed to fill a vacancy, so then it wouldn't be a full term. But no, all of the terms are the same, but they're staggered.
Are they, how are they 2 years or?
I would have to look. We have 17 committees in our department, and every committee is different on the length of time. I want to say it's 3 or 4 in historic preservation.
It's 3 years because I was appointed in 17 and I was reappointed this year.
Okay. It's just confusing to me. Standardization. Okay with that word.
Well, and it's the table is frankly what's confusing because it doesn't show any of the background. It just has the random first time you came in and when you're supposed to leave. So I'll clean that table up maybe next time.
At least you have a list of when they expire. I know me as a trustee in Westridge Oaks, we don't know when our terms expire. We're just guessing.
That's because nobody wants that job. They probably do that on purpose. They just hope you keep going.
I didn't have our HOA meeting this year. I sure am making sure we have one next year because my term definitely expires and I'm out.
Mr. Chair, tell the mayor that you like this dance and you want to continue dancing.
All right. Yeah, I'll let him know. Okay, so the next okay, we got that. So we're into the another fun item, the ready for action, the old business, which one was the location of the Orville Historic Community Marker.
Well, thank you again, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair and members of the commission, as you know, back in October, on what was a very beautiful day, we ventured out to the Orville Historic Community. And with the assistance of 2 police officers, we're able to kind of walk around the bridge area and look at general locations for the placement of our last historic community marker. The consensus as we left that location and headed elsewhere was that there were 3 possible locations, and they were identified as location 1, 2, and 3. And in the memorandum prepared by Ms. Arnett and I, we described those generally speaking as either north or south of the bridge on the east or west side of Etherton Road. With those 3 locations in hand, in terms of consensus of the commission, the department submitted them to the Planning and Parks Committee of City Council. That particular committee oversees the Department of Planning and Parks, and for the most part is integral in many of the decisions it makes. The outcome of that presentation to the council committee was that they felt location number 2, which was south of the new bridge on the west side of Etherton Road, would be unacceptable due to the fact that there would have to be a manipulation of the guardrail to create the pull-off area. They were concerned about cost, safety aspects, and just other considerations. Knowing that, the department prepared this memorandum identifying the remaining 2 locations, one again south of the bridge, but on the east side of Etherton Road, and the other on the north side of the bridge on the west side of Etherton Road. In support of that, the department provided the engineered drawings for the bridge project, which shows those 2 locations. They're identified by location 1 and location 3. And then I provided photographs of the general locations from that day. The department has taken the liberty to offer a recommendation for consideration tonight by the commission members. From the perspective of the department, it believes location 1 may be the best location just from the standpoint of impacts as well as safety and ease of construction. And location 1 again is south of the bridge on the east side of Etherton Road, and it was for the most part just to the south of that asphalt driveway that came out of that larger property that fronts along that same road. So just wanted to update you on what the department's been doing with the council committee and how the council committee narrowed the choices to 2. And the department is recommending location 1 tonight. Thank you.
Okay, any discussion or comments by anybody? Or I guess we'll need I'll take a motion for accepting the department's recommendation too.
And that was again, Joe, just going to be a pull-off area where people could take pictures and just have a moment. So it's not going to be a huge development there on the roadside.
No, I think if we do anything more than a small pull-off area and the sign itself, we've done too much.
Great.
Teresa?
Yeah, do we, just thinking about the options, the 3 also, I know you recommended 1, but did we find out from that location on the north side, can we use that driveway as a pull-off? And can we add gravel and use that driveway?
If you look at the plan sheet for location 3, there is adequate enough right-of-way, I believe, to accommodate it. It's a little tighter there because there seems to be a greater amount of right-of-way that was either dedicated or granted as easement on the east side of Etherton Road. From the department's perspective, I was thinking more as if I were the property owner, and all of a sudden there's additional gravel or asphalt next to my driveway, and all of a sudden there's cars parking there on occasion. I was trying to avoid the intrusion as much as possible. But if the commission prefers that location, again, that's what we're here for, is to hear what you have to say and follow your direction.
Now, we talked about how we thought that would be an intrusion on their driveway and that people may end up taking advantage of that driveway, which could be problematic for the homeowner.
I was just thinking the driveway of the abandoned house is what I was.
Oh, okay. I was on the other side of the street.
Because the south side, the drawback I see for the south side is the people might block that driveway.
Well,
Further away from the driveway though.
yes, it's down by the utility pole. And I didn't want to match line it and give you a large sheet. I gave you 2 different ones. But regarding location 3, again, the department was looking ahead and saying the house is abandoned, it's dilapidated, but someday somebody will purchase that and probably build something there. And my point was, and will be to you tonight as the commission members, is that we want to place it once and not have to move it, I guess, is the perspective I took. So again, it wouldn't be probably problematic now, But that house and that lot isn't going to stay like that forever.
Yeah, well, I think your recommendations, I know there's a lot of noise with some of the neighbors. I think the recommendation that you make kind of gets away from being directly across the street from some of the noise that you've incurred in the past. Is that fair?
Yes, sir. Very fair.
Yes, and I guess also the having that abandoned house there would almost be like a magnet for people that are stopping to want to go up there and look inside. I mean, it's hard for me not to.
Yeah.
I think that's a very good point.
Well, and like Joe said, the right of way on that west side is up there near that driveway. That's as by as, it's pretty tight up there. I'm not saying we got ample right of way on that, on that east side, but and then we are pushed. The right of way is purchased more towards that existing driveway that's coming out there. So, I think Teresa's got a good point about that, but I think we're staying away from this other driveway of that abandoned house is probably maybe a better idea. And we stay away from the feud that's going on over there north of the bridge.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we accept the department's recommendation of using location 1.
And I second it.
I think Ms. Stevens had her hand up before we vote on something.
Well, it has really nothing to do with the vote, but away from the items that we were discussing, I think the sign being at the entrance to the historical area might catch people's attention more to stop and look into it than if it's in the middle of the historic area.
Good point.
Good point.
So, Mr. Chair, before the vote's taken, there's just a couple of things I want to add. With this selection of a location, regardless if this is approved, location 1 is approved, or location 3, if the location 1 isn't, the department will then have a concept plan drawn up, and we'll provide that to that property owner that has frontage in this area, so he and she can look at it. And then we'll get their feedback before we bring anything back to you in terms of a hard line drawing.
Okay, that sounds good. So we got a motion by Chris, seconded by Jim. Let's all in favor, or should we take a voice vote, or just say we'll see how it goes? Okay, all in favor? Aye.
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 There we go. So
Thank you very much.
Option location 1, Joe.
And we'll get you some information back as soon as we can, and we'll get this thing resolved here hopefully in the start of 2021.
It'll be nice to get that. It'll be nice to get that final one installed. Collecting dust in the stockpile somewhere, or in the garage, wherever that's at.
Yes,
Contractor's yard.
Mr. Gailey has it, and he's taking good care of it.
I think it might be in his dining room, actually.
That's where I have it.
Right? He'll be sad to see it go when we do put it. But that is the perfect segue into our 2020 work program, which we kind of have already reviewed with our 2021 work program. So I won't belabor the point. I will just say that Mr. Bunich stole my thunder, because the one item that we did complete in 2020 was our bicentennial work as part of the 2021 state activities. So when we do hear on the 3 community legacies, we'll report back. But that was one that we set out to accomplish, and we achieved it. So other than that, we have 12 items underway. 1 new addition with Cone Park, and 3 that we've yet to start. So I'd be happy to answer any questions on the work program.
Well, we didn't want to complete everything this year. We got to save something for next year.
Right? Exactly.
Looking at the promoting of Route 66. Maybe it's a little off of the mark. Have we looked into the possibility of, painting Route 66, that symbol, on the, either on the road or on the bicycle path alongside of it? I know we had talked about that, and it would sure be nice to have that painted on there when people start coming out here.
We have,
We've got one. We had the one thermoplastic marking installed in front of Big Chief before their celebration last year, I guess it was. So that was just a test. I got a freebie from the contract, the fabricator of that stuff. So that looks pretty good, and it's holding up pretty good, I think, still. But yeah, we've been thinking about that, and where we put it, I think we ought to probably have discussions on that next year if we want to go that direction. And Joe's got to have the budget for us to put those down. So, Jan?
I believe Alan has been trying to get our attention. Did you see him lighting up at times, but didn't get to say anything? So you might want to call on him and see if he's got something to say.
Yes,
specific that you haven't said. Are you on? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Can you hear me? I had my computer worked on yesterday, and they changed everything around. So I've been working on my computer while your meeting's going on. Try and get it alive again. So you can hear me now, though.
We can't see you.
You couldn't a couple times because I said some things. I knew you couldn't hear me. I think it's functioning. Can you see me?
We can't see you, but we can hear you now. I didn't hear you before. And
yeah, I've seen all of you. You're all on, but I'm just a black square.
I have to open his video.
Open your video.
Oh, it looks like he's almost there.
Yep.
It's trying. There he is.
There he is.
Ah,
Yay!
thank you. Thank you.
And
I am
we can
real.
wrap the meeting up now.
I've seen you all evening, so
I'm sorry about that.
just listening. I voted a number of times, but I could tell you couldn't hear me vote.
And I
Thank
didn't
you.
even see the square light up either. Unfortunately, I was, I had the participants down in your square, but I still didn't see the green light up. But I'm looking at 12 people here, so I may have missed you.
Exactly. Thank you.
So Kathy,
I didn't want to interrupt you.
informative on the votes, unless you were a nay on something, Alan.
I counted them. So Mr. Buckert, if you voted no on something, you need to tell me, but otherwise I have you down for everything.
Thank you.
Very good.
Couldn't even wave because you couldn't see me.
So I guess we've got
for the interruption.
So we've got an upcoming meeting on January 28th. Is that correct, Joe? The next meeting?
Yes, sir.
Sorry, I muted myself finally to your all's benefit. But yes, that's the next scheduled meeting.
Okay, any closing remarks, Kathy, Joe, anybody else?
Well, at this time,
Merry
Kathy
Christmas.
and I, yes, at this time, it's traditional to say that you don't know how much we appreciate your efforts, because without you, there wouldn't be a Historic Preservation Commission, and many of the things that people take for granted in Wildwood would not get done. So Kathy and I would like to thank you and wish you the best of the holiday season.
It's good to have Teresa on the group.
Thank you.
Elizabeth, thanks for joining us this year.
Thank you.
Hopefully you don't try to jump off next year and you continue with us.
I'm here. You can't get rid of me.
And thank you for your leadership, all of you.
Yeah, I appreciate everybody here. So I know you take a lot of things for granted, but in this day and age, in this times, you can't take anything for granted. So I know I feel blessed to be associated with this commission and with all of you.
I'm happy to see that everyone here is well, that we're all still alive, kicking.
Here, here.
Very true.
Also, there are those of us who have gray hair. We're going to be on the
Oh, there's a baby.
Uh-oh.
vaccination list.
Oh,
Yeah, he looks like he's a chunker there, but he's not very chunky.
adorable.
So, okay, well, thanks a lot, and I'll take a motion to adjourn. I got to do that, right, Joe?
Yes.
Jim moves to adjourn, seconded by Dan. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Merry Christmas,
Stay
everyone.
safe.
Christmas
Oh,
night.
before we go, I've got a question for you. A little off the subject. That property